What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Goodyear 400 Top 5 DFS Picks video for Sunday, May 9th at Darlington Raceway, aka the Lady in the Black. As always, I am your host, Chris Pennell. You can find me on Twitter at ChrisPennell16, and this video is presented by PrizePicks. In today's video, we are going over general track strategy, how to approach the slate from a DFS perspective, and my top 5 favorite plays on the slate. Keep in mind, this video is being recorded pre-practice and qualifying, which has been very important so far this year. So some of my thoughts and opinions on these drivers will and probably end up changing throughout the entire weekend. So making sure you're staying up to date on what happens on the track on Saturday and Sunday will be very beneficial to you in creating fantasy NASCAR lineups this weekend. And if you want the up-to-date info and analysis, you can find me and Jason on the Awesemo Live Before Lock show, breaking down the entire slate and answering any questions you may end up having. And as far as how we should approach this slate from a DFS perspective, you can find a lot of similarities from Dover last week and I think heading into Darlington this weekend. Darlington is a pretty unique track, but if you're looking for similar comparisons to Darlington, I think Dover is one of those tracks that we can certainly look at. It's also a steep track that produces some tire wear, and it's also a short track. Now, Darlington's kind of right in the middle. It's in an awkward spot. It's 1.3 miles in length. Dover is 1 mile in length, and we look at intermediates from at least 1.5 miles in length. So it's kind of in that weird spot where you're not really sure whether you want to call it an intermediate or a short track. But if you're looking for other tracks to compare it to, I think Homestead, Miami, 1.5 mile track that produces tire wear is another one we can look at. Also, Old Atlanta, when it used to be a very abrasive, high tire wear surface, and Auto Club earlier this season. So looking at some of those tracks to compare to Darlington, even though it is a unique track, is something I am looking to do. Now, we don't quite have 400 laps like we had last weekend, so dominator points aren't going to be as important, but we still have close to 300 this weekend, meaning that dominator points are still going to be important, even though they're not quite as abundant as we had last weekend and like we had at Richmond and Martinsville, some other short tracks that we were at earlier in the season. So looking to at least get 2 per lineup, which the pricing on the salaries for DraftKings and FanDuel aren't quite as steep as they were last weekend, so it's not going to be as hard to fit them in, because last week we had several drivers above $11,000. This week we only have Kyle Larson, 11K range. Everybody else is around 10K or below, so it's a little bit easier to fit in multi-dominator lineups this weekend. So getting into the picks, we will start with a cheap driver. Number 5, we have Cole Custer, $6,300 on DraftKings, only $5,000 over on FanDuel. Similar price point as last week, and last weekend ended up starting pretty far in the back, making him a very viable DFS play. And even though he dug himself in a hole early on where he got a lap down, ended up still having a very solid day for the price tag that he had. A 15th place finish at Dover last weekend, also an 11th place finish at Auto Club earlier this year, which was another very high tire wear track. And the most recent race we had at Darlington last season, he also brought home an 11th place finish. If we can get Cole Custer in a decent enough spot, we're starting pretty far in the back, or at least mid-pack, to offer us some place differential upside. Hard to imagine he can't bring us back some value. Looking at a short cup career at Darlington, he does have a couple top 15 finishes. He's had some also solid finishes earlier this year. So his price point, I do think he can be a very solid play down low to help us fit in some dominators up top this weekend. And moving on to number 4, this is a driver that got quite the price bump this weekend, but it's Erik Jones, up to $7,700 on DraftKings and $7,200 up from $5K over on FanDuel. But with Darlington being a pretty unique track, some drivers just know the way around Darlington, and Erik Jones is one of those guys. Now, some of these numbers do come from his GGR days, which was top-level equipment in the 20 car, but he still has a very rock-solid career at Darlington with a win at Darlington, which is kind of crazy for Erik Jones, but this has been a very good track for him. 3 top 5s, 4 top 10s. Now we get up front for 50 DraftKings points per race. And while a lot of those numbers do come from the JGR days, Jones has been pretty solid this year at similar tracks. He finished 10th at Dover last week and was pretty fast. And 3rd at Auto Club earlier in the year. We had one of the absolute best cars in the entire field. Started up front, stayed up front, got some dominator points, and was near the very top as far as average green flag speed went. So Erik Jones showing some speed at similar tracks this year is what's really giving me some promise heading into the weekend. So as long as he's solid in practice, and I don't really think it's going to matter where he starts. I think he'll be able to hold his position and maybe gain depending on where he ends up starting. If he ends up being in the back, we get a different place differential play. If he starts close to the front, I think he can be one of those guys that's solid for tournaments as far as holding his own, picking up some fast stops on the way, and grabbing a top 10 finish. And moving on to number 3, it's a driver I think might be a little bit underpriced this weekend, but it's Kevin Harvick, $8,800 on DraftKings, only $9,000 over on FanDuel. And if you're looking at drivers that have great track history here at Darlington, look no further than Kevin Harvick with his average finish of 3.3 since the past few seasons. It's one of the best average running positions. Also has 2 wins and 5 top 5s the past 6 races. It's also some of the most dominant points in the entire field. He's great at similar tracks, and if you're looking at the 2022 numbers, while he hasn't really been able to get up front and dominate, he's still putting up some of the best overall finishes, and he's been one of the more consistent drivers this season with an average finish of 8.3, close to 50 DraftKings points per race, and 4 top 10s with only 1 top 5, but I think those will rack up as the season progresses. And while he has not been a flashy play this year, as long as he's not starting within the top 5, I still think he's going to be a guy that we can hope for a top 5 finish, pick up some fast laps along the way, and overall give us a pretty good return, sub $9,000 over on DraftKings. And before we get into our next pick, I want to talk about our sponsor, Prize Picks. They offer a daily prop-based contest. You can use promo code Awesemo for a $100 first match deposit bonus. There's no sharks, optimizers, or mass entries. 5-player lineups can net up to 10 times your entry fee. Use your knowledge of multiple sports with across sport entries. You can download in the App Store, on Google Play, or play over on PrizePicks.com. Use our free player prop tools to help you make the best selections. You can get up to 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum when you sign up and make a deposit over at Prize Picks. You'll receive an email within 24 to 48 hours after to redeem your free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And moving on to number 2, it's a driver that's been not fun to bet against this year, but it's Ross Chastain of the One Car for Trackhouse, $9,700 on DraftKings. His price came up quite a bit from the mid 8K range that we saw last weekend, and up to $11,500 over on FanDuel. And while the price does look a bit steep for a guy like Ross Chastain, doesn't quite have that name value yet, he definitely deserves this, and I would not be surprised if we see him in the 5-digit range soon. He has just been so good so far this year, whether it's a short track, an intermediate, a super speedway, a road course. It doesn't matter. Ross Chastain seems to find his way up front. So while the price is rising, I don't really think it's high enough yet. Finished 3rd at Darlington last year, and he was not nearly as good last season as he has been this year. He can definitely ride the high line, which is something you have to do here at Darlington. And if you're looking at his numbers for the 2022 season at normal tracks, excluding super speedways and road courses, no one is averaging more DraftKings points per race than Ross Chastain right now, currently sitting at right around 57. Also has 4 top 5s, which is more than any driver. Got a good chunk of dominator points, and I would not be surprised if he can find his way towards the front once again. Do not be afraid of the price hike. I'm hoping that keeps people away from him, but I'm not concerned with it. I still think we're getting him at a pretty fair price point below $10,000, because that is certainly going to get there as the season progresses, in my opinion. And finally, my number 1 play for the Goodyear 400 at Darlington Raceway. It's no other than Kyle Larson, $11,000 on DraftKings, $14,000 over on FanDuel. Once again, the most expensive driver on both sites. Now, while it didn't work out last weekend, you got to remember he did get some damage early on in that race, which kind of hurt his day overall. He was able to run up front the beginning portion, and then they faded away towards the end. He didn't have the fastest car, though, I will say that, but I still think with Darlington being a unique track and is a track that he really excels at, I think that should be beneficial for him heading into this weekend. But he's been absolutely excellent here. Doesn't have any wins at Darlington, but he has been very close to it. The past several years, he has an average finish of 2nd place, nearly 90 DraftKings points per race. He finished runner-up in both races last year, some of the most laps led, the most fast laps here at Darlington. And while he hasn't been the top-level driver that he was last season, but he still has a win this year, 3 top 5s and 4 top 10s. The only thing is he's only averaging 12.7 laps led per race. Meanwhile, last year, we were close to 100 laps led per race. So I think this can improve. He definitely has not been 2021 Kyle Larson so far this year. And you can definitely make a case for Chase Elliott being the top driver, especially with what he did at Dover last weekend. And I think we are going to see a lot of similarities from Dover heading into Darlington. But with the track history that Kyle Larson has, I think he can ride the high line, which is what you have to do, which I mentioned with Ross Chastain previously. I think that's going to be very beneficial to him. Hopefully he has a fast practice. Doesn't really matter where he starts. I will have interest, but I'm hoping he starts close to the front so he can pick up those dominator points early on. So just to recap, at number 5, we have Cole Custer, number 4, Erik Jones, number 3, Kevin Harvick, number 2, Ross Chastain, and number 1, Kyle Larson. All these drivers have either excelled at the high tire wear tracks so far this season, have in the past, are excellent at Darlington, or just have been really, really fast so far this year. And if you did end up enjoying today's content, please leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and leave a comment down below agreeing or disagreeing with any of the takes that I had throughout this video, as we love to hear your opinions and thoughts over on Awesemo. You can also follow us on Sunday for the Live Before Lock show, where we break down the entire slate, answer any questions you may end up having post-practice and qualifying, so you get that most up-to-date information, which will be very beneficial to you while when you're creating fantasy NASCAR lineups this weekend. With that being said, I wish you all the best of luck, and I cannot wait for the race at Darlington this weekend, as it is one of my favorite tracks in all of NASCAR.